We move over to the pass catchers for love-hate here, and after an absolute monster week, of course, Drake London kicks this thing off. But Drake London, he called it before the game even happened. Take a listen to Drake. This was before the monster Thursday Night Football performance.
I mean, we have a new dude throwing the pill back there, so there's a bunch of stuff that's different. We have new head coaches, we got new OC, so there's a lot of things that we have to get in order and to gel, So it's going to take some time, but I think we're on the verge of that, and we're ready to finally have the breakout games that we know we can have.
Boy, was he right. Drake London, a 28.5% target share over his last 4 games. This is the Drake London season, Matthew, that we've been waiting for, and he's got a quarterback now to guide him there.
He's averaging 10 targets per game over the last 4, a 28.5% target share. Why do I bring up the target share? Why do I bring up the fact that he's getting at least 10 targets a game? Well, because wide receivers that have seen at least 7 targets against Carolina, averaging 18.3 fantasy points per game. They've, in fact, allowed multiple touchdowns to wide receivers in 3 of the past 4. I have him at wide receiver 4 today, or this week.
Dude's balling. Double-digit targets in 2 straight games. Carolina's giving up 8 receiving touchdowns to receivers this year. That's tied for second most in the NFL this year. And Drake London himself has scored 3 of the 4 games. He's on his way to being a touchdown machine, a yak machine, a target machine. Matthew mentioned the target share, so we definitely love Drake London this week.
Another top 10 receiver this week, Terry McLaurin. It was a slow start to the season for Terry McLaurin, but Lawrence, over the last 3 games, he's got a 30% target share in an offense that's really starting to throw the ball well with Jaden Daniels there.
Yeah, I just mentioned how Carolina has 8 receiving touchdowns, tied for second in the NFL to receivers. The team they're tied with is the Baltimore Ravens. Now, the Ravens, they look great on offense. They look great on run defense. But in pass defense, they can be had, and that's the reason that this over-under for this game is 52.5. Terry McLaurin himself, like you said, he's gotten going. Versus this Baltimore team that's the second worst against receivers in fantasy, I look for it to continue. The DBs need help.
No team in the NFL has allowed more catches to wide receivers. They've also given up the second most yards on deep passes as well. So Terry McLaurin is a top 7 wide receiver for me this week in a shootout with the Ravens. 30% target share for Terry McLaurin. 30%. This will be a fascinating game because the one thing I will say is that if there's a defense that should be able to understand and stop Jaden Daniels, it's the Ravens, because they see that, in essence, every week and every day in practice, because the quarterback that's most like Jaden Daniels in the NFL is Lamar. Yeah. Having said that, though, and I'm not saying Jaden Daniels is Lamar. Lamar is, a 2-time and look like he's on his way to a 3rd MVP. Yeah. It's a very unique skill set, but he's the most similar. Like you can't like Joe Flacco can't impersonate Jaden Daniels. Certainly not. So anyway, I can't wait for that game.
That's the game of the week, right?
Yeah,
that got to be the game of the week.
Detroit and Dallas is also a pretty good game, as well. And of course, Bengals Giants on Sunday Night Football. Awesome game.
The London, you know what else?
I'm a company man.
It is.
You know what else? Hey, Giants have won a couple in a row. Malik Neighbors is a star. Joe Burrow's a star. Jamar Chase. We got
T. Higgins is back.
T. Higgins is back.
You want points.
Yeah, we want
Sunday Night Football has scoring.
It's gonna be a lot of scoring.
You left the name out of there. It's kind of disrespectful, but it's cool.
Wan'Dale Robinson.
Nope.
Daniel Jones.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Tyrone Tracy on Primetime.
No, go back.
Now we're talking.
Yeah.
Now we're talking.
Tyrone Tracy,
Theo
Daniel
Johnson.
Jones. That's what I'm here for.
Theo Johnson.
Eric Gray.
Eric Gray. We'll see. Singletary return practice, by the way, that's also one to watch out for, because if Tracy gets another start, we like him. No, I know. And Zach Moss is banged up. Anyway, we'll go through all the injuries tomorrow.
We also got another London game, the Bears against the Jags. DJ Moore's a top 15 play at wide receiver 14 here, Matthew. Jacksonville has allowed the most yards and the most fantasy points to wide receivers this season. We do need to keep an eye on when their top corner, Tyson Campbell, will be active for a game, but that's not going to completely fix this struggling defense.
DJ Moore has at least a 20% target share in every game this season. Wide receivers who have seen a 20% target share against the Jaguars, averaging 18.2 fantasy points per game. So, we've talked about this. We think the Jaguars actually have a decent run defense. It's the secondary where you attack them. Caleb Williams getting better week after week, and when he's looking for somebody, he's looking for DJ Moore.
Yeah, they're the Jacksonville Jaguars DBs is getting smoked. They've allowed the most yards per game, 210 to receivers. Like that's kind of a lot. They've allowed the second most receptions to them as well. So like you say, run game, little decent, but pass defense, like the Baltimore Ravens, need some help.
Yes.
We got a tight end on the love list, and Trey McBride, Lawrence, at least a 28% target share in 3 of his 4 games played. He's just got to be healthy, and Trey McBride's effective.
Yeah, it was nice to see him get back going last week. Led the team in targets with 9. Was only tight end 13, but he didn't get the touchdown. But still, to see him in with 6 catches for 53 yards, that was promising for him.
Some others receiving votes here. Zay Flowers, Tank Dell, Matthew, Jalen Tolbert, Michael Wilson, and Cade Otton, Mr. 8 points a week. Cade Otton, which is good for a tight end right now.
20% target share of his last 3 games, and over the last month, the Saints have allowed the 5th most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. I thought it was going to be the human torch in Arizona, and maybe it still will be, but very quietly, Michael Wilson has 3 straight games with at least a 20% target share. That should be a little bit of a sneaky shootout as the Packers have allowed the 8th most yards to wide receivers. You mentioned Tolbert again. We don't think they're going to be able to run the ball. Dallas is going to have to throw against the Lions, and it's worth noting Detroit's allowed the 2nd most fantasy points to wide receivers. So Tolbert, off the big game last week, is a top 40 play for me this week. Tank Dell, again, we've talked about this Nico Collins injury situation. He's going to miss a few weeks as well. Deeper league guys, Xavier Hutchinson, I think he'll get more run, but hopefully the expectation here is that Tank Dell should get a lot more routes, a lot more targets, a lot more snaps with Nico Collins out. That's a 29% target share that is suddenly freed up with Nico Collins not able to play. It's worth noting that Dell last year, in the 6 games in which he got at least 7 targets, he scored in all 6 and averaged 23.4 fantasy points per game. They're at New England, and it'd be interesting. I mean, do you think Christian Gonzalez is on Tank Dell? They're not going to put him in the slot against Stephon Diggs.
I think he might follow Diggs a little bit with a safety to help.
Right. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how they play that out. And Diggs obviously can play outside as well, and they'll move Dell in sometimes. They'll try to get creative.
That's the key. Right.
Yeah.
I wonder if Gonzalez just follows whoever the top guy is on the outside. At the end of the day, I mean, simple as this. This is what you've been waiting for if you have Tank Dell. Like, this is the time.
He's too good to have been this bad. I think he's viable. And last one, Lawrence, Zay Flowers. We saw the big game. In games in which the Ravens have been competitive, Zay Flowers has been great. Yeah. It's just when they blow teams out, I don't think they blow out my Commanders.
Yeah, this game could be interesting because I remember the Lions last year got rolling. They went to Baltimore and just got destroyed. Like, a little bit of me is feeling like that for the Commanders, but it's like Jaden Daniels is just so – he's precise. He's making right decisions, and he's not Jared Goff. If you get pressure, he could get out of that, right? But for Zay Flowers, though, like you said, he's getting double-digit targets. It's what we expected in the Bengals game from them, right? So if he gets those double-digit targets, he's either getting you the yards or he's going to get a touchdown. So got to love him as well.
Commanders have already allowed at least 15 fantasy points to 6 different wide receivers. Zay Flowers with a 25% target share in every game this year.
So the Commanders are good, but they're good for that too.
They're good for that too. The one thing I will say you're right about Jaden Daniels, and I could see if you tell me whatever happened, I could believe they go in there and the Ravens just blow them out the way they did with the Bills. I could see the Commanders winning this game. I could see it being a close game and the Ravens win a close one at home. Justin Tucker kicks a 60-yard at the gun. Whatever. I will say the one thing that's interesting here is that it's not only that Jaden Daniels is playing so well for himself, it's that he's got the entire team believing. This is a team that, like, defensively, we've got a lot of the guys there, the Daron Paynes, the Jonathan Allens, the guys that have been there, they've seen sort of like, here we go again.
Right.
And now I think on the sideline, everyone else is like, faith in 5.
That's the Dan Quinn effect, too.
Yeah, faith in 5. Dan Quinn 100% is a rah-rah guy. And give Cliff Kingsbury credit. I was skeptical. I think a lot of people were like, really? Cliff, didn't seem to work out in Arizona. And it's, the offense has been
maybe
special.
He's just better suited as a
coordinator.
Coordinator, kind of like a guy like Arthur Smith. Some guys are just, they're better off calling the plays.
100%. That was always my argument with Norv Turner. Norv Turner is one of the best offense coordinators in history. but the consistency as a head coach wasn't there.
Because you lose the time you once had to allocate it all to one thing. That's the problem. We just went over this with Robert Saleh getting fired this week.
Yeah.
He's really one of the best defensive minds in the NFL.
Sure.
He was a really bad head coach because he started to allocate times to things he wasn't good at anymore.
Right.
It's just the curse of going from coordinator to head coach and not being ready for it.
Some people are better as head coaches, some people are better as
Dan
coordinators.
Campbell.
For sure. Yeah.
He's the opposite.
Yes.
Perfect CEO of a team.
Perfect CEO of a team, yeah.
All right, we get to the hate list here.
like that
Calvin
call.
Ridley tops that at wide receiver 35. I mean, Matthew, the Calvin Ridley season is just insane right now. He is yet to see a red zone or end zone target this season. He had the one big touchdown against the Jets that we said earlier in the week probably should have been picked off, and it feels like he hasn't made any other plays besides that.
The offense is it's been a struggle, obviously, for Tennessee. The quarterback position hasn't produced the way they want it to. And what's weird is that he's got 4 or fewer receptions in every game this year, targeted on only 16% of his routes. His average depth of target is 19.5. You're like, well, they're chucking to him deep. Sure, but they're not giving me any of the easy stuff. Like, he's not getting any bubble screens, any quick slants, anything. No. Like, it's none of the easy stuff. And only 61% of his targets so far this year have been catchable. We thought signing the big free agent contract that he was going to be the focal point of this offense, and it just hasn't gone the way the Titans would like for Brian Callahan. Now, they are off the bye. Hopefully they spent 2 weeks kind of cleaning up and fixing this passing offense, and I'm sure that Brian Callahan knows that if they're going to get anywhere, Calvin Ridley's got to be a part of it. But you don't feel great about this matchup against Indianapolis, especially because you heard us talk up Tony Pollard early in the show. We think Tennessee's going to be able to run the ball very well, and they play good defense. Again, their defense has had 2 weeks to prepare for a home game against the Colts.
Like, I would feel decent about this going against the Colts defense if the passing game was more in order. Like, we just saw the Colts defense get lit up by Trevor Lawrence and the Jags, and they had been struggling.
This is fair.
They had been struggling all year until they got to the Colts, but you just can't trust it when you know Ridley's out there, and outside of that 40-yard touchdown catch, which you said was a bad throw, right? He would have like almost no fantasy points, and that's scary to think about.
But Lawrence, the argument here is that I think that's a great point. But Trevor Lawrence is somebody who is like, one of the highest paid quarterbacks in the NFL, former #1 overall pick, somebody that has had success at the NFL level, led his team to a playoff victory and a massive comeback. He's struggled somewhat this year, but Trevor Lawrence has played at a high level in this league on a pass-first offense. So the fact that he was able to sort of get off the schneid against the Colts makes sense, whereas whether it's Will Levis or somebody else starting for the Titans, they have not had that level of success. And I don't know that the Titans, again, we thought coming to the season Callahan wanted to be more pass-first, but you could see them sitting here saying like, hey, we got a young quarterback that's still finding his groove. Let's take some pressure off of him. We feel good about our defensive matchups. Right. Let's just run the hell out of the ball with Tony Pollard. Let's give Will Levis,
that's what's gonna happen.
That's what I think. And so,
he gave away the ball so much in the first 2
exactly.
weeks. He handed the Jets the game in week 2 after a tough turnover in week 1. They want to take the ball out of his hands.
Well, right. And just be like, dude, you don't have to win the game.
Yes.
Like, don't put it all on your shoulder. That's, I think, like, listen, I'm a Will Levis stan, so I'm not going to sit here and trash on the kid. I'll just say that, if his biggest flaw is he's just trying too hard, like, I'll take that, right? Because you can learn that, right?
Yes.
I mean, he's a gutty kid. Like, no one can, guy puts it out there on the line. Anyway, I'm rooting for Will Levis, but Calvin Ridley makes the hate list this week.
In this same game, keep an eye on the injuries, specifically on the Colts side. This is a scary injury report right now. As Anthony Richardson, he's still dealing with the oblique. He was limited on Wednesday. Jonathan Taylor with that ankle, he didn't practice Wednesday. Trey Sermon with a collarbone, he didn't practice Wednesday. New news that we did not have when we were doing our show yesterday. Michael Pittman Jr. with a back injury. He's expected to miss multiple weeks now.
Yeah, and obviously
Josh
Downs, although you
Definitely
feel better about
Josh Downs.
You feel we all like Josh Downs the most in terms of a talent perspective here, and I would agree with you. Like, Josh Downs, regardless of who's at quarterback, Josh Downs will be my highest ranked Colts wide receiver. But depending on the quarterback, like, if it's Richardson, they're probably going to take more deep shots than they will Flacco. I feel better about Downs if Flacco's under center than I do with Richardson, because I think Richardson is more prone to take off and run. He's more prone to take a deep shot to like Alec Pierce or A.D. Mitchell. So I still think Downs is the most talented guy, but I think where I would rank him in the overall will be higher if Flacco's under center versus Richardson. at least at this point.
Lawrence, quick one for you. Do you think they just have refused to get Adonai Mitchell involved in this offense? Do you think Pittman being out forces the hand now?
It will a little bit, but I kind of see it as the same situation with Xavier Worthy and the Chiefs. They're just two young guys. We know they can run the full route tree, but they're still trying to find their way in their respective offenses, and that's proven by Juju going off and by Alec Pierce going off again.
Yeah, and what do you think of Mitchell? Because I've seen different reports on him so far this year that some people are saying, like, listen, he's doing great. Like my buddy Scott Barrett talks about how much separation he's getting.
Right.
Shout out to Scott. But also like he's not earning targets, right?
Right.
And there's some people that thought he was more of a raw prospect.
He was. He has the talent of a number one wide receiver. The size, the speed, the movement skills. This was someone that had some success at Georgia. He transferred to Texas. He was very productive at Texas, but consistency was always the problem. There was some times where he was just coasting through routes or not as sharp through routes. I think the Colts, just like Lawrence hinted at, don't want to throw everything on his plate right now. They see him as a developmental, high upside prospect that they don't need to play unless they have to. So I wouldn't expect a lot this year, personally, for Mitchell.
Fair enough.
Maybe
There'll probably
big
be some
play,
splashy plays.
but not a guy that gets 5 to 6 targets a game, even with an injury.
We are, as a show, we are all team Josh Downs.
That's right. Ladd McConkey also makes the hate list. Denver has allowed the second fewest fantasy points to wide receivers this year. I mean, Lawrence, nobody wants to see Surtain. And this is a team that doesn't really throw the ball that great to begin with.
So don't nobody want to see Riley Moss either.
He's balling right now.
Don't nobody want to see him.
It's not Surtain gets the headlines, but that whole secondary's playing great.
Moss has been awesome this year.
Yeah, they balling. In Denver, like you said, good defense. They're second against receivers in fantasy. You look at the game total here, 35.5. It just doesn't measure up to wanting to start any of these receivers in this game when both teams want to run the football.
This is a rock fight, Matthew.
It really is. The Broncos have yet to allow a touchdown to the slot this season. That's obviously where McConkey runs the majority of his routes as well. So, yeah, he's wide receiver 34 for me this week, But better days are ahead for McConkey. We like him.
Once upon a time, Matthew, we thought this was the Jameson Williams breakout year, and while it's still been good, the target share is down 12% over his last 2 games.
Yeah, and as Sam Laporta's getting healthier, he's getting more involved. Amon-Ra St. Brown, he's not going away. Oh, by the way, this is a team that wants to run the ball. It's a run-first offense. I think it's because Amon-Ra is so great, because we've seen them get into some shootouts as their defense over the years is, getting better, but, they weren't always there. But it's a team that ultimately, under Dan Campbell, wants to run the ball. They have one of the best offensive lines in football. And so when you're running the ball a lot, you're not throwing. And so to your point about the 12% target share, you don't feel great about Jameson Williams going against a Dallas defense that is top 10 in terms of fewest fantasy points allowed to opposing wide receivers. And they allow the lowest completion rate on deep passes, which is a big part, obviously, of Jameson Williams' game. He's my wide receiver 36 for me this week.
Our last one, Lawrence, Evan Ingram right now, he's going to be back this week or expected to be back, but the Bears have been a top 5 defense against tight ends in fantasy.
Yeah, I'm definitely not going to say to bench Evan Ingram, but you should temper with the expectations. A guy who's been out for 4 games over the past 4 weeks. The Bears have allowed the 4th fewest fantasy points to tight ends. So just if you got him in there, I understand, but you're going to have to temper the expectations there.
Yeah, he's missed 4 games. And to your point about the Bears defense, Lawrence, Bears top 10 in terms of fewest receptions, yards, and catch rate allowed to opposing tight ends. They have defended the position very, very well. So Evan Ingram, I think he is, again, the tight end position is what it is. So you probably have to start Ingram because you don't have better options, but I would lower expectations. He's more in that 10 to 12 range than the top 5 to 6 range he was drafted in for at least this week. Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and Rotoworld.com, and I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched, or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest Roto-World fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.